The storm clawed the mountain, but the thud at the gate was a body's final fall. Brother Stephen, who had not spoken in 30 years, pulled back the bolt. A small orc child lay in the mud, an arrow in her side, blood pooling. Her lips moved, but only a wet, broken sound. Stephen stared, throat locked. He lifted her. She weighed less than a sack of grain, soaking his robe. Inside, he laid her on the straw pallet. The wound was deep, still bleeding. He pressed linen against it with both hands. The cloth darkened instantly. She whimpered. His hands, slick with blood, could not pray, could not call for help. Silence was his plague. Rena's eyes opened. She saw a gaunt face, silent as a grave. A tear traced his prayer lines. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, only ragged breath and the drip of blood. The child fought for air. Then her voice scraped through, small and broken.
Rena, I am Erina. The raiders. They came for my clan.
Stephen grabbed a slate and scratched her name in chalk, holding it for her to see.
Those marks. I don't know them. Can you not speak?
His throat locked. He had no voice to explain. His hands clenched at his own neck.
They killed my father, my brother. I ran, but the arrow found me.
Her words blurred as the blood seeped. Her hand found his robe, clutching weak as a leaf.
Please, you must tell the spirits my name. Promise me.
Stephen could only nod, his silence a cage. Tears cut through the blood on his cheeks. The candle flames guttered. The storm paused, waiting for a word that would not come.
My mother pushed me away, told me to run. I saw her fall.
A memory surfaced in Stephen, unbidden. A village burning, screams lost to flame, just as she had described. He had once stood among those ashes, a boy whose fiery words had lit the match. Back in the chapel, Stephen's frame shook. He pressed a fist to his chest, as if to crush the memory.
My brother. He was smaller than me. I should have carried him, but I was afraid.
Stephen's lips moved in a silent plea, not to his god of silence, but to whatever mercies still listened. Her voice was a thread now, fraying, each word a battle she was losing to the dark. Inside, the old war raged again. The same guilt, just wearing a different face.
Don't let them be forgotten. Please. I don't want to be nothing.
Stephen could only watch her slip away, the cloth in his hands already cold and dark.
Please. Just one word. My name. Let the mountain spirits hear it before I am gone.
Her tiny green hand, slick with her own blood, rose and pressed against his trembling lips. Stephen felt the warmth of her touch, and his eyes burned with tears that refused to fall. He parted his lips, trying to force out the sound, but only a dry, crackling hiss escaped. The muscles of his throat locked tight. 30 years of silence would not break for anyone. He wrenched his head back, a silent refusal, tears cutting fresh tracks into his gaunt face.
Please. I am not afraid to die, but don't let my spirit wander nameless in the dark.
She reached again, her fingers trembling, the plea as urgent as the wound still seeping.
Just once. Say my name once, and I can go. Please. I don't want to be nothing.
Stephen squeezed, his eyes shut. The old guilt and this new grief colliding in his stubborn silence. Behind his closed eyes, the past roared back. A younger face, a different fire.
Rise! Will you let them burn our homes while we kneel? Fight or be slaves!
The crowd answered with blood. By dawn, an entire village was ash and silence.
What have I done? They were not soldiers. They were children.
He stumbled through the ruins, the spear in his hand heavier than any sin. He crawled to the monastery, begging for a punishment that would silence the screams.
Let silence be your penance. Speak no word, and perhaps the dead forgive.
Now, Stephen opened his eyes to the dying child, and the irony bled him dry. His voice had once been a weapon. Now, His silence was a new killer. Slow, certain, monstrous, and the fire that had started with his words still burned. 30 years later, in a child's wound,
My brother, he was so small. I should have carried him.
Stephen heard the same guilt he'd nursed for 30 years, but spoken in a child's fading voice.
I dropped his hand to run faster. He fell. I heard him scream.
A silent sob racked Stephen's frame. He pulled her closer, as if his warmth could undo both their sins. Her blood soaked into his robe, a baptism of shared failure.
Are you a mountain spirit? One who cannot speak, only feel?
He wished he were. A spirit could not break vows, could not fail again.
If I were stone, I would not have to choose.
But he was flesh and old scars, and her hand was still warm on his chest. Rena's question drifted into the candle smoke, unanswered.
In my clan, when someone dies, their name must be spoken to the sky. If no one says it, their spirit fades to nothing.
Then a spoken name was more than comfort. It was the only tether between her and eternity. Stephen thought of the countless dead from that burning village, their names lost, their spirits unmoored by his silence. He formed her name on his lips, the shape of it a prayer he couldn't release. But his throat was a dry well, only a whisper of breath where a word should be.
I can feel it. The nothingness. Please. I don't want to disappear.
Stephen's thumb brushed her cheek, a silent promise that he would try again. His lips quivered against his will, a phantom of the sound he owed her.
Even a spirit should have a name. Don't let me fade, please.
And in the silence, the only answer was the drip of blood and the mountain's ancient, indifferent wind. He snatched a scrap of vellum, dipped his trembling finger in the pooling blood, and scrawled the letters of her name.
I don't know those shapes. I never learned to read.
He lifted her cold hand and traced YRENNA across her palm, pressing each letter with desperate intensity. But her fingers were already numb. She could not feel the message he carved into her skin. He slammed his fist against his own leg, the sound a muffled, frustrated sob in the quiet chapel.
It's okay. Maybe you can't. It's not your fault.
That unconditional forgiveness cut deeper than any blade. It meant she had already surrendered. He shook his head violently, his entire body a silent scream of protest against his own weakness.
Just stay. Don't leave me alone in the dark.
The candles guttered, casting long shadows. Outside, the wind had died, as if the world was holding its breath. Stephen's mind slipped back 30 years, to the cold stone altar where he had knelt, still reeking of smoke.
Take this silence not as a shield, but as your cross. Every word you swallow will be a prayer for the dead.
The boy had nodded, believing that burden would slowly crush the guilt. Now, the rope belt at his waist felt more like a noose than a devotion.
What if my silence has become a tomb, not an atonement?
He traced the prayer markings on his scalp, symbols of penance that now mocked him with their permanence.
A vow that prevents mercy is not holy. It's a prison of pride.
He looked down at Rena, her breath so shallow it barely stirred the candle flame.
If I speak her name, I break the vow. If I keep silent, I break a child's spirit. Which is the greater sin?
And in the hush, the abbot's ancient voice still echoed. Speak no word, but a dying whisper begged the opposite. Rena's eyes flew open, clear as spring water, a final spark of life igniting in her gaze.
Please. Before I go, just my name. I don't want to be nothing.
The plea hit Stephen like a physical blow, shattering the last wall around his heart.
My silence has never been penance. It was cowardice. I was hiding from the dead, not honoring them.
He cradled her tighter, a new resolve stealing his spine.
I will speak. Let the vow break. Let it shatter into 1,000 pieces if it means she does not fade.
Her hand, so small, found his lips again, as if blessing the voice still trapped inside. Stephen nodded, a fierce, silent promise, tears mixing with her blood on his cheeks. In that moment, 30 years of silence cracked open, not from sound, but from surrender. He drew a ragged breath, lips parting, the name waiting on his tongue, ready to breach the dam. He exhaled and tried to form the word, but only a thin, reedy wheeze escaped his throat.
Number. It's been too long. My voice is dead.
He tried again, forcing air through his unused vocal cords. A choked, guttural gasp, then silence. He clutched his own throat, nails digging in as if he could claw the sound free.
30 years of silence has stolen even this. I am a tomb.
The third attempt was a dry retch, his whole body convulsing with the effort. But no word came. Yerena's eyes, still open, reflected the fading candlelight and the desperation of a man fighting his own flesh.
It's okay. I can see you trying.
But her hand, still on his lips, fell limp to her side, the last strength spent. Stephen stared, chest heaving, his throat a locked gate, her name still echoing in the silence. With a final desperate contraction of his stomach, he forced out a cracked, raw "your" into the dark. The effort tore his throat. A thin line of blood welled at the corner of his mouth, mixing with the tear tracks. Rena's lips twitched upward at the sound, the faintest ghost of a smile on her fading face.
So close. One more push, and it's hers.
But the next breath locked again. He slammed his fist onto the stone floor, a mute howl of fury.
If you can't, just hold me. It's okay. I felt you try.
Her forgiveness cut deeper than any failure, a blade of pure grace that laid his soul bare.
She's forgiving me for the very thing I should have been doing all along.
He gathered her gently, rocking back and forth, silent sobs racking his frame as he cradled the dying child. The candle flames leaned toward them, as if straining to hear the name, still trapped in his throat. He pressed his forehead to hers, a silent vow forming between them that was louder than any word.
I will speak, not for my penance, but for her peace.
His hands, still slick with blood, unclenched from his hair and settled gently on her shoulders. Rena did not answer. Her breath was a faint whisper, but her hand remained in his. He lifted his head, eyes burning, and looked toward the altar, where the abbot's ghost still lingered.
I hear you, old man, but silence is not mercy. It's a slow death.
He drew a long breath, filling his lungs as if for the first time in 30 years. And then he placed a hand over her small, cold fingers and closed his eyes.
Rena, I will say your name, even if it breaks me.
A single candle flame grew tall and steady in the silence, as if the mountain itself listened. Rena's cracked lips parted, drawing him closer with a whisper.
There is a story of a voice keeper, one who speaks the names of the forgotten so their spirits can rest. It is not a sin to speak for the dead. It is the highest honor. Anyone can become one, if they are brave enough.
Stephen's eyes snapped open, the legend striking a chord that hummed through his silent years.
A voice keeper is not a vow breaker. It is a speaker for the forgotten. This is not my penance. It is my purpose.
He gazed at her hand, no longer seeing a barrier, but a bridge.
Then I will be her voice keeper. I will speak her name, and all the names I silenced before.
He pressed a gentle kiss to her bloodied fingers, sealing a pact no vow could ever touch. Rena's breath was nearly gone, but her eyes held a question. Was he ready? Stephen answered with a slow, deliberate nod, a vow of a different kind, now forged in silence and blood. He pulled his hand away from his own throat, no longer a tormentor, but an instrument. The nails had left small red crescents on his skin. He wiped the blood from his cracked lips with the back of his sleeve, a simple, sacred preparation.
The abbot said, "Speak no word." But those were the words of a frightened boy, not of a man standing at death's gate.
His hands stilled on his knees, the shaking gone. He fixed his gaze on Rena and took the first full breath he'd drawn in 30 years.
My silence was my punishment, but her name is my redemption. I break no vow, I fulfill one.
He leaned over her, his mouth close to her ear. One hand still gently clasping her cold fingers, his lips moved, silently forming each syllable. Yur, en, ne, a rehearsal only his heart could hear.
Now, let the mountain hear. Let her be remembered.
The candles seemed to hold their light, as if the very air thickened in waiting. He filled his lungs with a slow, deliberate breath. The final preparation before the word became flesh. He opened his mouth, and a dry, ancient croak clawed its way out. Raw as the mountain itself, Rena's eyes widened. The faintest light flickered there. Hope reborn from a sound that was barely a word.
You have a voice. It's there. I heard it.
He tried again, shaping the syllable that had once been a weapon, now a gift. You're hoarse and warped.
It's like learning to walk on broken legs, but it's there.
He pushed air through the rusted channel of his throat, shaping the next letter, E. A grinding, precious sound. Her tiny green hand still rested in his, the fingers curling weakly around his thumb. In encouragement, he gathered all the fragments of Ur and E into one breath, pushing them together like stones into a wall. His body shook with the effort, but his gaze on her face never wavered. The name was almost whole. Rena's eyes slipped closed, but her smile remained, a frozen star waiting to be born.
Please, I can feel the darkness. Speak my name, for me.
That final plea snapped the last chain around his heart. He drew a sharp, shuddering breath.
Ren-na.
The name hung in the air like a golden bell, ringing for the first time in 30 years.
Thank you.
Then her eyes slid shut, and the smile remained, frozen in eternal peace. The child was gone. Stephen gathered her still form into his arms, burying his face in her blood-matted hair. A sob tore through him, rough and raw, a sound now unchained. His tears fell onto her green skin, washing the blood of a child he had not saved, but whose name would never be forgotten. The vow lay shattered on the cold stone floor, but in its place was a voice, and that voice, ragged and old, whispered her name again into the silence that had once been his prison. The word became a litany, each repetition a stone pulled from the wall around his heart. He rocked her, the name ebbing and flowing like the tide of a broken sea. Tears streamed down his weathered face, not only of grief, but of release, a dam finally breached. Outside the arched window, the first golden rays of dawn spilled over the mountain peaks, chasing away the storm. The chapel, once a tomb of silence, now echoed with the ragged, sacred sound of a name.
It was not the vow I broke, but the silence that kept me from this.
The candles, now mere stubs, guttered in the draft of a new day, but their light was no longer needed. He laid her gently back onto the straw pallet, arranging her small hands across her chest. His voice, still raw, addressed the altar for the first time in 3 decades, a prayer not of words, but of presence. And then he stood, the weight of 30 years still on his shoulders, but now accompanied by purpose. He crossed to the chapel door and unbarred it. The dawn light struck his face like a blade of gold. He stepped outside for the first time in 30 years. The mountain air sharp with promise. The narrow mountain trail was treacherous, but his feet found the old rhythm, driven by a name he could now speak.
You there, the governor. Which path?
The woodcutter's eyes went wide at the sound, a stranger who wielded words like a rusty tool.
Raiders, slaughtering orcs in the valley. The governor must know.
The man pointed a trembling arm down the valley road, then hurried away, carrying the warning with him. Stephen continued downward, the name Rena a pulse in his throat. Each stranger he passed a new ear for her story. His voice, though hoarse, gathered strength with every step, a weapon no longer, but a beacon. At last, the town gates rose before him, guarded walls that would soon hear the testimony of a broken silence. He crossed the great hall, a ragged shadow against banners of power. Governor Herrick leaned forward as the bloodied monk opened his mouth and spoke.
A child named Rena died in my arms. Raiders are slaughtering her clan in the valley. She asked only for her name to be spoken. I promised to find justice for her.
Herrick's face shifted from official mask to deep, listening grief. He turned, issued orders, and a wax seal pressed a warrant into law. Riders thundered from the gates, spears glinting in the afternoon sun. Then Stephen's legs folded. He slumped to the floor, the long night claiming him. When he woke, the governor knelt beside him, no longer a lord, but a man.
You broke your silence for a child's name. I will ensure that name endures.
Weeks later, Stephen opened the chapel gate to a procession of green faces climbing the mountain path.
I am Elder Gornak. We heard of the human who spoke the name of a forgotten child and brought fire upon the raiders.
Stephen, his voice still raw, bowed his head.
You are no longer a silent monk. You are a voice keeper, the one who speaks for the forgotten. Take this token.
I will, for Rena and all the others.
He led the children into the chapel, now a schoolroom, and began to teach them their letters.
That is an A. It stands for the beginning, like the first breath you draw.
The young orcs, with wide amber eyes, watched his lips shape sounds that would become their own names. One small green hand, gripping a piece of chalk, traced a clumsy Y across a slate, and Stephen smiled, his voice now a bridge between worlds, built from a child's final wish. Years later, an old monk knelt before a simple stone marker on the mountainside, wildflowers blooming around it. Stephen's hair was white as the mountain snow, but his voice, now steady, wove through the crisp air.
Rena.
The carved letters on the stone seemed to glow gold in the sun's final slanting rays. A gust swept down from the peak, carrying her name across the valleys like a prayer finally answered. He smiled, a quiet, deep peace settling over features once etched only with guilt and silence. The silence that had been his prison was now only a rest between the words that mattered most. Inside the chapel, a single candle still burned on the altar, unflickering in the mountain draft. Its flame, small but steady, held against the dark, a witness to a name that would never be forgotten. And the mountain, ancient and indifferent, now echoed with the voice of its keeper.